Now in this video, also for my fans, I'm just going to let you know straight up, there will be no fruit porn in respect to 64 audio in this video. The absolute best bass I've heard out of any IM, period. And you have something playing kind of, and then all of a sudden there's a big bass hit or something that the conductor is trying to get out of emotional wise out of the music, and the Volu plays it in a way that is special. Because everything about isobaric and the whole reason for doing it, it absolutely 100% works in this IM. Everyone else who has tried to do some kind of double driver, you shit the bed and failed. So all those other designs, you can go back to the drawing board and learn how to do it correctly. 64 audio, good job. And especially if you have another 64 audio, you might be curious about how it did and how the implementation of the bass drivers are in this particular one. Jeff Martin has a tonal depth to his voice, the likes I have never heard of before. And the funny part about the Volu for sound-wise is it was still incredibly resolving. But now it's really showing its ability to play musically, not just hyper-realistically. Happens, but there's some kind of texture in the lower mids, lower bass, that I have never heard of in like male vocals. It has a depth and a texture to male vocals that I haven't heard before. And the mixing, right? Because it's the 80s, right? To see if my raving or ranting was justified, or was I just talking shit. Okay, I'm back. Today, I'm here with Kilo, and we're going to talk about the 64 audio Volu. 10 driver hybrid with some cool tech. I've done a couple videos of 64 audio. Spoiler alert, this is by far their best release that I've heard. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of their technology, and I apologize, and I'll timestamp. If you know about 64 audio, you can just skip to the sound impressions. But for you that are new to 64 audio and don't know much about them, well, let's share a little bit about stuff. So I love the fact on the back they give you a little picture of the breakdown of the drivers, and not too many do without revealing too much going on. So this is $2,499. Inside of this packaging, you get a nice little box. Here is some information. We'll talk about that for a second. And then you get the classic 64 audio puck case. In the bottom, there's a spongy with your IMs. The velours are in there, and underneath was the Apex modules, and we'll also talk about that. Don't forget the fabulous 64 audio stickers. How Apple-like is that? On the other side, you get the other side of the puck case with a huge selection of ear tips, including some foamies. You get a little clip for your shirt, for your cable. You get a little cleaning brush. And lastly, of course, you get this classic 64 audio cable. I'll speak to the elephant in the room, but I'm speaking directly to you, 64 audio. This is $2,499. Though I understand why you would include this cable, it's made in 3.5. It's made more for musicians. So who are you trying to sell this to? Obviously, I think musicians would do a CIEM. So if this is a universal, so maybe your target audience would be your audiophile listener, and this is unexcusable. Cables aren't that expensive to manufacture. You know it, I know it, and this IM deserves a much nicer, fancier cable for the money that you'd pay. Okay? That's enough of that rant. I didn't use the stock cable. I did for a little bit of listening impressions, but honestly, this IM deserves a better cable. Now, $2,499, what does it give you? It gives you 10 drivers per side. 2 low dynamic drivers in a true isobaric configuration. We will talk about that. 6 mid balanced armatures, 1 mid high balanced armature, and 1 specialized TIA balanced armature drivers. It has a sensitivity of 103 dB, 6.3 ohms impedance, and there's a circuit in there that also helps make this easily drivable for everything. 4-way crossover, and it comes included with 4 Apex tuning modules. And again, if you're unfamiliar with that, we'll talk about that in a little bit here. In fact, actually, why don't we jump straight into Apex tuning modules, why and where they are. Well, firstly, if you haven't seen a 64 audio with this technology, there is a little, it's called, in this case, it's an Apex tuning module, and it's a little module, and it's right on the end, and there's two little finger spots where you can pull it out, and there's two rubber gaskets, and there's a socket on the other end with a hole into the actual IEM. And they're easy to pull out and replace, and you can even do it whilst in your ears. Now, in the 4 tuning modules, let's explain actually what they do and why they're there, first of all. So, according to 64 audio, to alleviate a listener fatigue is the whole premise of this. When you seal a miniature speaker, I'm doing their speak, in an ear canal, the air inside becomes trapped. As the speaker produces sound, it moves the air and causes the eardrum to work excessively. The pressure exerted on the eardrum causes ear fatigue, also known as listener fatigue. Apex relieves this pressure, allowing the eardrum to move naturally so you can comfortably listen longer. I agree. Extend the soundstage. Apex enables air to move freely in the inner ear canal, which extends the soundstage and allows a more natural listening experience. A more open soundstage also preserves the bass frequencies and helps the listener distinguish individual instruments. Ultimately, artists are better able to follow their mixes and execute the best performance possible. Choose your isolation. There are 3 levels of isolation provided by Apex. Actually, there's 5. M20, so 20 decibels. That would be the silver module. M15, 15 dBs of isolation. That would be the dark gray module. And then the new one, the gold, the M12, so 12 dBs, and the MX, which is black, and finally one more, which they sell separately. It's called the M26 solid. It's a solid. There is no pressure relief on that bend. It's a solid plug, and it's kind of a copper looking one. It's pretty funky, actually. The MX is the that's the black one. So that's the reduces the ambient noise isolation to only 10 dB, minus 10, but in return transforms earphones into a mastering grade tool with the very resolved sound signature. Each of our in-ear monitors is built with a specific Apex module in mind. Oh, that's interesting. However, our standard external Apex modules are designed to be replaceable so you can rotate between levels of isolation and sound flavors. Each module is positioned to prevent debris and buildup and significantly minimize wind noise. This compact design is built for the most demanding users, and the internal design of the module is mindfully made to be durable and virtually maintenance-free. So with the different colors, right, beautiful, you can easily identify what it is if you can remember which one it is. 64 Audio, you did it correctly, of course. You engineered this and pioneered this technology. So this actually, this technology quite works, and it does change the tuning. So I'll pull up a graph here, and you can see that the tuning gets changed by the how much of the isolation or how much air pressure is released out of this module. So the least bassiest, of course, is the MX module. And that one, between the most bassy and the least bassy, there is about 12, a little bit more than 12 dBs of bass differential. So that's quite a bit. The M12, so the new gold one, is kind of middle ground, right? And then your other two, your M15 and your M20. So the M15 and the M20, the difference is virtually 1.5 dB in the sub. Other than that, they're pretty much identical across the board. For my listening impressions, all of it was done on the M15 dark gray module. I think it sounds the most balanced for me, and overall achieved the best tuning for my preferences. So I'm not looking for a monitor-like tuning. I'm looking for a more audiophile tuning that works for my preferences, and I like my bass. And we will talk about that bass coming up here, because I'm going to have another little rant about isobaric design, so bear with me in a good way. So, mine is configured on a DD Hi-Fi NIX Pro modular cable, and I'm using these Pen-On orange lacquer tips. I really like these tips. They're sticky. They remind me of an Osla crystal tip, and they fit really well. I really think they're well designed. One of my new favorite tips. Now, moving on to next one. So I will apologize up front for some of my notes going all over the place. The night I got them in, there was some libations involved, and I write just my observations under the influence. And then I go back and I do some more listening sessions, in this case, to see if my raving or ranting was justified, or was I just talking shit. So now in this video, also for my fans, I'm just going to let you know straight up, there will be no fruit porn in respect to 64 audio in this video. Unlike my U4S video, I went a little over the top on that one. So this one's going to be a little bit more educational, I hope. And let's go dive more into some core technologies from 64 audio if you've never experienced some of that stuff. So let's talk about that. Now, that was the Apex modules we talked about, and there's some other really cool stuff that does put these IEMs at some of the top of the game. And let's one of the things I alluded to earlier in the specifications, where it said it had a fairly low impedance, right? So it was what, minus 6.3 impedance. Now that's fairly low, and I think the reason they do that is it's very easy to drive off the amplified packs that musicians use. And for whatever gear that you're going to hook it up to, you get a very consistent sound. So other than the coloration of your source, which is going to be a massive topic in this video, you are going to get a pretty even output. Now, and that's called, LIB. So enjoy a steadfast sound at any venue from studio to stage. This proprietary circuit ensures your IM sound signature stays the same no matter what it's plugged into. Very interesting, and yes, it does work. Though something about that circuit was freaking out on the Astle and Kern Con Max. 3D Fit, a new way of manufacturing custom in-ears. So any of theirs you can get as a, this one you see as, of course, the universal, but you can get it as a custom. And you just need to send them your impressions. We talked about the Apex tuning module, the TIA drivers, and the tubeless transparency. Okay, our industry first, tubeless technology, not exactly true. Eliminates sound altering dampeners and tubes. This reduces resonance levels and a new level of resolution and transparency. Yes, that is true. They're not the only company that has done that. You've watched my video about plunge audio unities. Simon Fisk has been doing it also for 20 years. So the TIA driver, though, okay, the TIA driver is the one that's responsible for the high frequencies. It is an open balanced armature speaker. So you typically see a little balanced armature and it has a little nozzle on it ready for a tube, where this one actually does not. Actually, it resonates as an open baffle kind of design. By opening a balanced armature, the diaphragm becomes fully unobstructed, unleashing the sound potential of the driver. This eliminates a lot of the vibrations and resonances that are inherent in conventional closed balance armature designs. With this new method of producing and delivering sound to the ear, conventional sound tubes and dampeners are no longer necessary. Though, you need to position this thing in a certain way. So, in their trademark TIA single bore, what they do is they basically put it very close in the nozzle. So the high frequencies are resonating right inside the nozzle, closest to you getting out of the sound chamber. So the large bore of the sound chamber itself serves as a sound shaping chamber and aids the TIA driver in delivering a linear and coherent frequency response. Because of the extremely short sound path of the TIA high driver, a remarkable high frequency extension and smoothness is achieved. The large single bore also helps prevent clogging of the tip and obstruction of sound. And all that is very true. So some do it in the single bore chamber, and then there's also the acoustic chambers of the some of the IMs, and I'm not sure which one the Volu uses. I'll see if I can find out. If they're doing it with the TIA acoustic chamber, it basically has its own space inside of the IM cavity. Each driver is perfectly matched to its acoustic chamber, just like a pair of speakers are tuned to a studio control room, delivering a three-dimensional soundstage unmatched by any other IM. Again, that's a bit of marketing speak, and not necessarily fact. So there's a couple that actually I've heard that do this now with without sound tubes. So that is the Plunge Audio Unity, all of the 64 audios I've listened to, and I just listened to a TWS from Alpha and Delta that also surprisingly did not do that. The BA and the dynamic driver were in the not in the nozzle, but in a bulbous part before the nozzle as a sound chamber. Quite interesting. In a $80 IM TWS. So that was a shocker for me. Now, so I was all over the board in my notes here, so bear with me and forgive my convoluted speaks. Let us actually talk about those isobaric drivers as well. So let me go into Universal and let's talk about the Volu and the isobaric. Now, you've heard me rant about the the Zigats, the Theaudios, the Penon Quattro. They're all saying we are using isobaric drivers. I've built isobaric drivers for many years. I worked for a speaker manufacturer and I worked in car audio as an installer. And I know speakers. I'm not saying I'm the authority of speakers, but I may know a little bit more than your average Joe. So, and I know when we used to build isobarics, the first time, I'll give you just a little short story that I heard an isobaric design and I wanted to learn more. This car came in, he was from the States, and come up across the border, his amp stopped working, blah, 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 blah. He asked us to look at it. And we fixed his amp wiring solution, and we fired up his car, and there was this incredibly detailed and articulate and thumpy as hell bass. And looking around, trying to find where the hell it's coming from, there was this little plywood box, and I swear to God, it was maybe 6 inches, maybe about 8 inches wide. It was about 36 inches long, and it was about 24 inches high. And out of this little sub box came an amazing bass, and we did kind of reverse engineer it, took it apart, took some pictures, because couldn't believe what we were hearing out of this thing. And inside there was 2 6-inch subwoofers firing face to face in an isobaric design. And this case, just like some of those ones I've just mentioned, so there was a baffle and there was 2 woofers, and they were wired in reverse phase, which means that while one was firing this way, this one was firing this way. So they were working as a pair. And what they were doing is they were controlling cone movement. And that is the whole part of the premise of isobaric subwoofers. You can get more control, you can get more speed, you can get more dynamics, you can get less distortion, you can get a sub that's easier to drive, so you get more power to them, more power output. And whoever designed and built this box knew their stuff, and soon afterwards we researched the shit out of this and started doing the same. Now there's 2 kinds of isobarics. There's push-push and there's push-pull, right? So most of the ones that you see on the market are not isobaric. There's just 2 drivers firing against each other, working against each other and trying to shove sound out of a little sound tube. And from everything that I've heard in that design, it doesn't make great bass. It really doesn't. I was not wowed by the Theaudios. I was not wowed by the Penon at all. Was I wowed at this 64 audio velour bass? Yes, I was, because everything about isobaric and the whole reason for doing it, it absolutely 100% works in this IEM. So all those other designs, you can go back to the drawing board and learn how to do it correctly. 64 audio, good job. There's 2 drivers in this one. Same kind of idea, except for engineered for an IEM. So which means that there is 1 driver. It's got an infinite baffle at the back that allows it to vent and not mix the sound with the front wave. And then that driver, energy, is connected to a sealed tube and chamber to the second driver. And with the air motion in between those 2, they do work as one, as a push-push system. So very well thought out, very well executed. There's a video that I'm going to link to it to show you that as well. Now, the bass. We'll talk about sound in a bit. Actually, I'll pull up the diagram. You can see what I'm talking about there. And let's talk about that bass, actually, just for a minute. So I'm back. I'm still talking about bass. The reason I'm making such a big deal about this is the bass on the Volu is the best I've heard out of any 64. It might be the absolute best bass I've heard out of any IM, period. And that is saying a lot. I'm not talking volume of bass. I'm talking quality of bass and texture. And I just want to go back for a second because the bass on this thing plays a massive role in the overall tuning of this. And especially if you have another 64 audio, you might be curious about how it did and how the implementation of the bass drivers are in this particular one. So they're talking about the two. Now, these are customized. Now, a lot of companies say that 9mm dynamic drivers, but I understand a bit more. Is the fact that they had to wire these in this isobaric configuration. Well, they didn't have to, but they chose to wire them in series. So that means you're going to get less sensitivity. So they're not going to be as loud. Could have wired them in parallel, but then you would have had kind of the opposite thing. The drivers may have drowned out everything else. So instead, what they had to do in these custom 9mm is actually get a much stronger magnet. So to get the sensitivity back up and feed it in a way that it would balance out with the rest of the drivers' overall tuning. It's quite brilliant the way they did that. They also put a passive tuning filter on the output where the bass comes out for the dynamic driver to further. You can cross it over electronically, and you can also do it passively, which they did in both cases in this one, to give the output of the subs truly some texture and the ability to really play low, and they did that. The 6 BAs are mid-low, so they also are doing something. And I'll talk later about, I don't know if it's the combination of the dynamic drivers, the tuning, the cabinet, the BAs, or what happens, but there's some kind of texture in the lower mids, lower bass, that I have never heard of in like male vocals. It has a depth and a texture to male vocals that I haven't heard before. Was quite special. Now, 64 Audio says, okay, hey, the isobaric low driver dampening decreases low frequency smear. This is why they did it, right? It's not just for shits and giggles and for a marketing thing. They did it for a reason. Lowering the noise floor to a darker background between notes and beats, allowing details to shine. This creates more palatable impact with subtle sub-bass information, revealing the artist's true intentions, and a full sound at low volumes. True. Mids maintain that signature rich quality and almost tube-saturated presentation. Yes, maybe. I'll talk about sources. Upper mids enhance holographic center imaging that really shines with vocals. Artia waveguide plays the biggest role in improving the high frequency response since our invention of the direct radiating driver, increasing clarity and stereo imaging. Okay. I'm going to quit the marketing speak, but all that was mostly true. I can understand from their video too how much work went into making all 10 of those drivers fit into this cabinet. It's quite impressive. I just noticed something else, that it has a vent on the back of the shell. I don't remember seeing that before. That's quite interesting. Now, before I get into sound, and we talked enough about the isobaric designs, I will say straight up, everyone else who has tried to do some kind of double driver, you shit the bed and failed. 64 audio, you went bang on, you understand isobaric, you did it in a way that makes sense, and the real world implications, you can hear it, they're audible. And this is why it sounds the way it does. Now, let's talk about, I'm just going to go read some of my notes from my observations. Bass, it's just wow, incredible. It's incredibly textured, powerful. If I didn't read that, their marketing speak, this is me speaking from my observations. It is incredibly textured, powerful, and a perfect blend of sub-boom and speedy mid-bass slam. Best bass I ever heard? I had a question mark, yes or no. It's really close to the yes. I'm going to go with yes. Now, this is a funny one. So some of these observations were done on the Astral and Kern Con Max and sources. Wow. So with that DAP, it's incredibly transparent, revealing, and that's the way the velour sounded. It is absolutely not forgiving at all, and I wrote the holy shit factor is high. It also surprisingly drove this incredibly powerful little DAP to work out. So I'm not sure if it's that one circuit or what it is, but the con actually got quite toasty playing the velours back. Haven't felt that before. It was quite hot when I had it on my lap. Back to the bass. So these observations were all over the place. It was basically what came to mind as I'm listening to this for the first time, and I guarantee that all of these are confirmed. I wasn't wrong on my first impressions, because you know what they say, normally your first impressions are the correct ones. Drum skins sound so damn real. I'm speechless other than saying that, because that says it all. And then as I was going through genres of music, I started playing whatever came up on the DAP. Classical music, yup. What I found with the velour was microdynamics were absolutely top tier. This is a top tier IEM. Absolutely. And microdynamics are some of the best I've ever heard. Now, you're not sure what I mean by that, so especially in classical music where you have very quiet passages and you have something playing kind of and then all of a sudden there's a big bass hit or something that the conductor is trying to get out of emotional wise out of the music, and the velour plays it in a way that is special. Some of the best, absolute best microdynamics I've ever heard, and macrodynamics, giving you a sense of emotion in the music, to convey that, to bring out even a story, bring out the story. It really plays a story incredibly well. And then I switched over to some Taylor Swift and Melanie Martinez. So pop music, right? I wrote, yes, damn Skippy. Stage, this is also subjective, and again back on the con, so incredibly revealing. Now stage is per track. Okay, what I mean by that, it's either intimate, very close to you, in your face, or massive and huge. Taylor Swift, You Need to Calm Down, live in Paris. The venue is massive. I mean, how many fans does she have in that auditorium? But whatever it is, you can tell it's an absolute boatload of people, right? Where most of the music happens. Mids. Marvin Gaye. Don't judge. Recording sounds vocal forward, and that is the recording. As it was intended from the producers. Let's get it on. Certainly got it on for me. It was doing things to me. Then, does it play rock? Yeah, it nailed it. Honestly. Halsey, Miley Cyrus, INXS, Metallica, Ozzy, Tea Party, Creed, Deep Purple. It was all fantastic. Acoustic and live. Now, again, remember, this is on the con. Nils Lofgren, Joe Satriani. It's very good. And this is where I came to an epiphany. And I started playing around with sources. Because at this point, it came apparent that the source is going to play a massive part in this whole thing. And here's where I wrote down, it's too accurate. It's not musical enough. And I was thinking back, ultimately, why didn't I buy a U12T? I had lots of chances. I had some smoking deals out there, but I never purchased one, even though I was wowed by that. And the answer is, honestly, I didn't think I would listen to it enough because it wasn't musical enough for me. It still bordered that technicalities over musicality. Still had the heart of a studio monitor versus an audiophile IEM. And that's why I didn't buy it. But I also was getting a feeling the velour might swing both ways. Okay, and my instincts were correct. And as I switched out from the con, I had threw it on my desktop stack, the Joshelle J2 with the Sparkos amps, and that had the 4493 DAC chip, and through the A90D topping amp. Also very revealing combination, and it was slightly warmer. So that's how I was getting a good sense of that. And I'll go back to vocals again. So my initial impressions, track like from the Tea Party, Dreams of Reason. Firstly, the instrumental was simply absolutely mind-boggling, incredible. But what got me was the vocals. I alluded to that a little bit earlier. Jeff Martin has a tonal depth to his voice, the likes I have never heard of before. And it was a depth to his vocals that was alluring. It was pulling me into the song, and it was simply incredible. And I was mesmerized by the playback of the velour with that track. And so now I started writing, so be prepared to pair with a warmer source. The A&K Con, it makes the set hyper-realistic, unnaturally squeaky clean. And I really think that's the case. Your source and how much your colorization will reflect your experience in this set. Now, not as much as the Plunge Audio Unity, because that is by far the reference standard that I've ever heard for a monitor-like tuning. It's a chameleon. It will, what goes in, what comes out. Now, the velour is 65% of that, which is a very high number compared to the Plunge Audio Unity. the A&K Can Max. Again, it was like a hyper transparent recording playback. The J2 AKM 4493 was very close to being the same. Now, switching over to the AKM 4499EX off another J2 that I have, and running it off the Gishelli E2 amp, it got nice and smooth. So I went kind of polar opposites. I went from hyper realistic, ultra revealing, transparent to very warm and smooth and gooey. And the funny part about the velour for sound-wise is it was still incredibly resolving. But now it's really showing its ability to play musically, not just hyper-realistically. Now, switching now over to the Shanling M8 DAP. With the 4490 EQs, I think is the perfect pairing because it is a warmer source. It brings out the resolving nature of the velours and the truthful nature, but it adds a colorization, a warmth to the velour, and the M8 did it quite nicely. Now, I never tried it on I don't have another tube amp. I sold my tube amps, but I think this set would be pretty incredible on a tube amp. But still, you get what you put in this set, you will get out 1000%. Okay? In all of this listening, I never changed out from the DD Hi-Fi cable because I just wanted a very neutral cable. I didn't want any, because in some of these very super realistic IMs, the cable can also affect your listening experience, but I didn't find that so much in this case as it was source. And I wanted to find a neutral cable. It was a good sounding dark cable, and I wanted to shape the sound with sources. And that's what I spent the great deal of today on, was doing exactly that. To talk more about the sound of the velour and the way it's shaped with sources, and in part with the Apex tuning modules. Now, I didn't deviate too much. I did my listens with the, and I've had 64 audio IMs before, so I know what the difference is between these. And again, if we pull up some of the graph, we can look at the bass drop or reduction or increase as we change different modules. And I chose the M15 for a very good reason. Yes, it didn't have the most bass that the M20 did, but so there was that little bit of 1.5 dB difference in the sub bass. What I traded off for sub bass was technicalities in the set. And listening to the M12, I realized that no, that I will trade off any day of the week in a heartbeat more bass than technicals. The reason being is that bass is so damn addictive. It is textured. It is stereo bass. And very rarely do I ever get stereo bass out of a set where realistically you're listening to a track, sometimes Great White, some 80s stuff, where they have double kicks. Right? They have two sets of drums, and I think they do, or two sets of kicks. Whatever the hell is happening, and the mixing, right? Because it's the 80s, right? That you get stereo bass, left textured bass, right textured bass that is sometimes not in, it's not in complete sync, so you can tell there's two different sets. And it's simply wonderful, and that is a rare. And not only is it is there when you can hear the hits of the drum skin and the decay and the texture. That is isobaric bass in a nutshell. The control, the dynamics, the ability to extend really low and snap back really fast and still give you some texture, right? Those 6 BAs, low mid BAs, are wonderful. And the fact that if they're helping out in the bottom end and they're adding in all of this everything happens in the mids typically, right? Tonality wise, the Volu, spot on. Timbre, tonality, ranks right up there with my Soft Ears Twilight. Absolutely. Vocals, both male and female, are, in my opinion, absolutely spot on. And again, that also affects in 2 different ways. It affects what modules you're using, and it also affects what source you are using as well, right? So, and again, the M15 for me, that module added as more of the lower mids and mids to make, for me, extremely happy for vocals in the mids for males, and female were spot on. Now, is it all roses? No, not exactly, because from my memory, what wowed me was in the U12T, where it allowed instruments to breathe in their own space. It had that kind of depth and layering that I don't get quite as much in the Volu. And I could, if I was willing to trade some of that bass, which I'm not. Never. I won't do it. Can't make me. But if I was going to the M12 module, yeah, because what happens is the bass is going to be by nature going to, I'm not going to say overpower, but it'll definitely change your perception of your upper mids and highs. If you hear more of the lower frequencies, your brain is also focusing on that, and it isn't focusing on it's not focusing on some of the upper registers. And if you were to reduce the bass, you are going to get more of that effect. And that's one of the big differences between like the U12T and the Volu, is the fact that this definitely has more bottom end. Definitely. And so you don't, some of that other is masked in the top end. I'm not saying that the upper mids and treble are reserved in any way, but with the M15 module, and probably the M20 of course as well, right, is in sometimes, so I was listening to Niels Lofgren, and he's got his acoustic guitar, and it's a live recording. There is a sharpness, a twang to the guitar. And the masking that happens because of the extra bottom end does kind of takes away some of the that sharpness that I love about that thing, and it also is going to play a big part in your source. So again, if I were listening to that on the con, it was like incredible acoustics, but it was, again, for me, my brain's going, oh, this is just too hyper realistic. It's just I want my colorization. I want my analogness. I want my tube sound. I want my vinyl, baby. And, it was an interesting conversation within the Canucks audio group, is some of the younger generations never grew up with vinyl, never grew up with a reel-to-reel, never grew up with a tape player, 8-track, sorry. And you haven't heard what analog sounds like. You've heard it through your Apple MP3 player compressed to shit through your Apple earbuds. And that is the generation. So hearing something hyper realistic, and the type of music that's being mixed and recorded these days is completely different. You listen to, what was I listening to? Some Who this morning. And the way they did their trippy analog recordings was meant to sound a certain way. And if you were to put it on a super revealing thing, you can totally pick out how shitty that recording is. And though then you're focusing on the recording and you're not focusing on the music. And that's where the different sources are going to come into play. So, I mean, at $2,500, hopefully you have a variety of sources at your disposal, or you're willing to buy to, if you're going to invest into this set, because I think for you, you're going to have to find the right pairing and that happy medium between the Apex modules and your source. But there is no doubt in my mind that from hyper-realistic, super analytical, completely transparent, on one level you can achieve, and on the other side you can do analog vinyl warm, with still never losing the technical chops to a degree where it completely is washed out. And that's not going to happen in this set. But this set is probably, out of all the 64s that I've had a chance to listen to, and all the IMs that I've had a chance to listen to, is, other than the Plunge Audio Unity, this one is incredibly sculptable, right? And one thing this set has over the Plunge Audio Unity, is that it can get to that level of musicality. It can get to that organicness. It can get to that kind of chillaxing ability that even on low volumes, you can just sit back and relax, and it's not, your brain isn't going to be pulled away and be completely spastic. Does it have that kind of same level of depth and layering as maybe some of the U12, U18? I don't think so. And again, that is probably to do with that extra fullness in the bottom end. But again, there is no way I would ever trade that wonderful bass for having more technicalities. I just think that the Volu has achieved a balance and a nirvana of sound that is extremely rare in this hobby, with any IM that I've ever heard so far, or anybody else describing an IM. So that was my entire conclusion, by the way, just kind of from the heart, off my sleeve, to you. My impressions of this set, and I come away with feeling blessed for this loaner and a chance to listen to this. So again, thank you, D-Man, for that. Bless your soul. So this monk is elevated to a next level, and what also has me excited as well, not to dampen this video and this greatness of this IM, is there's something else I know coming out from Plunge Audio that I've had a chance to listen to. Shameless plug, Canadian manufacturer, but from my 10 minutes of listening, the same kind of wow factor I had with this one. Watch my Plungies video and add a subwoofer open back to that. Boom, boom. Out for now.